Okie dokie. Do we have any new faces today? I see familiar faces. So moving on to release planning and updates. Starting with implementation. Jesse or Natalie, do either of you want to give a update on lifecycle release planning?
I think we'll ship the release candidate for lifecycle 014 today. We also shipped a patch last week. Fix a bug with caching and SBOMs.
Awesome. Thanks for the update. What about platform? Javier, any updates on platform?
I just got back, so I have not really seen what all has occurred. But yeah, I have not heard much from David either that I could tell. So I'll ping back, circle back around next week.
Sounds good. Distribution. Any updates there, Joe? All right. Okay, moving on from release planning. Up next on our list of featured topics that I copied down is the process reaper, but I don't see the Bloomberg folks here, at least right now. So I'm going to move that to the end of the list because I assume that they would like to be a part of that conversation. And we can move on to providing run image SBOMs. Talk about that one, Natalie.
Yes, I could share my screen if that would be helpful. Basically, let me just share. You can see my screen. Okay. So, and it's the right one. This one. Okay. Let me go to RFC. So basically, Anthony had put up an RFC prior to this that was about requiring the SBOM for a run image to be baked into the image itself and designated with a label. And after talking that one through, we had some sort of nagging concerns, which I linked to in this alternative section. But basically, following a conversation in working group a few weeks ago, we decided that it would be interesting for platforms to just supply the SBOM at the point of build. Sorry, the SBOM for the run image when doing a build, and we just basically making it more the responsibility of the platform to ensure that that's accurate. And anyway, I put this RFC up, which is really just sort of summarizing my understanding of, based on that discussion, how that could work. I think there's been some feedback, certain things that need to be understood better. I guess I'll just open the floor to anyone who had feedback to explain what they'd like to see.
I think I don't understand the argument about the accuracy of the SBOM. If it's coming from the platform versus coming from the image, it seems like the process that produced the image is the best source of the knowledge of what should go in the SBOM for the image.
I can represent some of Sam's concerns here because I think this was largely a sticking point for him, but it's mostly about folks who then extend run images with Docker files, which is a pretty common practice, where if you're not aware of the SBOM that's baked into the run image, now you've made a bunch of changes to that image, but the image is reporting an inaccurate SBOM because it's baked in there.
How does that get better if it's separate from the run image though, right? If someone extended the run image that didn't have the SBOM in it and then provided an SBOM that was associated with the version before that was extended with a Docker file, or like, I mean, is there a process or something that Bloomberg is using where it makes it more difficult to establish, like to track versions across SBOMs or something if they're put together?
I think the SBOM can always be wrong, right? But it's a question about whether you're being deliberate or not when you're providing it. It's like in the case where it's baked in, there'd be a whole system that would just assume it was correct and you wouldn't even know that it had gone out of date. Whereas if you're explicitly passing it, and platforms can add different checks in different environments to say like, yes, this is the run image SBOM that you should be using.
Got it. And there'd be no way, because it would change the digest of the image to add the SBOM, there's no way to say like, to invalidate it if the image changes, if it's part of it, or no super easy way at least.
Yeah, one of the suggestions from Sam was that if it wasn't the very last layer in the image, that would invalidate it. Which I think there's definitely pros to that, but the cons are that a lot of times when people are, making a change to one of these run images with a Docker file, they may not want to invalidate the SBOM, right? They're adding an environment variable there, and then it's very annoying if that invalidates your SBOM and there's no way to fix things.
You could capture the last layer in the image in the SBOM, like the last diff ID, and then you would know if the image was extended at least, and you wouldn't have to, but you could still extend it without invalidating it, as long as you somehow communicated that it's okay that the additional layers don't invalidate it. But I don't have a strong opinion. I think if
it's so hard for people who are doing this on the fly to then bake these SBOMs in, right? You have to create an image and then you have to use some special tooling to recreate it with the extra layer, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think he brought that up before. I'm not going to block this. It'd be great if when we create the tooling to consume run images, we can consume them in a standardized format with the SBOM in a standardized format.
I think this gives us options, and like maybe then we move to something that's more locked down in the future once we've solved our daemon problems and we're not baking everything into layers, right? But this allows us to have different conventions and different platforms without. This allows everything to be possible. Doesn't make anything magic, but.
Yeah, I think my worry is just making sure that when people do builds in general using artifacts that are produced by, kind of folks that distribute build packs, they always get an accurate SBOM and they aren't missing the base image part.
Yeah. Part of my concerns here are that I think we either need better tooling first to help people create stacks that would then have accurate SBOM baked in, or we need to let platforms handle this is another option, right? It's like putting a lot of onus onto stack creators when there's no tooling to support them.
I think in the end, we want it so when you pack build, right, you get, or use Kpack or any of the kind of common platform tools, you get an SBOM that includes the run image SBOM if the run image SBOM is available, right? And so it means that if we don't attach it to the run image like we're doing with the app images, then we need to say Pack CLI is going to read either a cosine, or if a cosine SBOM is available, we'll check for that. If a cosine attestation is available, also check for that, right? In the name
a layer SBOM is available, check for that if that's what we're doing right now. That
right.
Kind of thing.
We have to make those checks every time, right? We do a build in order to be able to pull this stuff. And so, especially that if we don't standardize in an internal format, we're always going to be reaching out to the registry to check for these additional images. which is okay. Just don't love that either.
Well, in the beginning, we could just do the later version in some platforms, right? Even if we're not doing it in the life cycle.
Yeah, I think as soon as we say we're not mandating that the format be part of the image, I think people will use standardized tools, right? Like cosign in order to create the signature, which means that if we want to get that guarantee, then we should have all the platforms check for all of the formats, right? And so PAC should reach out to the registry to look for the cosign SBOM and the cosign attestation, or on every build.
I think I might be getting confused in all the various sort of options out there. From what I understand, that's slightly different. The last statements are slightly different than what's in this RFC. Is that right?
I think it's an implication of not. This RFC is saying we shouldn't attach SBOM to the run images, right? We should let that be provided.
They should be bundled, right?
Right. And
yeah.
that means that when PAC does a build or when KPAC does a build, in order to source SBOM information to end up in the final image, right? As a platform, they're going to have to check for many potential sources of SBOM for the run image, right? So that means that PAC or KPAC or whatnot will have to reach back out to the registry and see if there are attestations or cosign SBOMs, maybe check the signature of those cosign SBOMs, right? So it could be, or this could cause us to increase the number of requests we're making back to the registry during the build process. It's just something I was pointing out, but I'm not blocking this again. It just it seems like it would simplify some things to have it consistently be part of the image.
Yeah, I mean, even if we dove a little bit more deep into that, anything that the platform does at that point where it inspects various potential sources for SBOMs, that is still something that the lifecycle itself could do, right? It already does, it already analyzes things in regards to the app image. I can't see why it wouldn't be able to analyze the run image as well, in simple terms.
I think this RFC is saying that we shouldn't have the life cycle do that, though, right? That it should be a separate input into it.
I think
it pushes that responsibility to the platform, right?
what I suggested was the preparer, this kind of yet to be fully defined component that platforms can provide. And Javier, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your RFC says that we should have a reference implementation. So maybe our reference implementation could include it. I don't know if we need to bake it into the life cycle exactly, but yeah, the project can provide something to help this along.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So basically going back to providing some sort of tooling for platforms to be able to easily access these features.
I think alternatively, all of this is going to be handled by SIFT. You can just point SIFT to a run image. If there's no SBOM, it will generate one. If there's one attached as an attestation, it will download that. So in terms of what we have to own or support, if we just include, if we do a SIFT scan on the run image, we just get everything. And then that's a tool that specializes in SBOM. So we can expect them to follow industry standards, and if there's a format that's gaining popularity, they'll include it.
It doesn't sound like that's something that would be part of our spec though, right? To have sort of this dependency shift. It would be more like that would be our sort of
implementation. Yeah. But I thought the spec change was just like providing a flag that says, here's a directory of SBOMs, and just include that. And the platform that's implementing it can just download those SBOMs using something like SIFT.
Sorry, could you say that later part again?
So like, I thought the idea was that the platform just provides the exporter with a directory containing SBOMs or just a single SBOM. As for how the platform actually fetches the initial set of SBOMs, that's entirely up to the platform. It's an implementation detail. So we're not including it in the spec.
And then we are saying, and this is the part where I added some comments about, we are saying that we are embedding this SBOM into the final app image and not allowing platforms to specify various potential different methods, sort of like an associated artifact.
Yes. I feel like changing the output format of the SBOM is a different can of worms, right? But this is just about the input format of the run image SBOM. And if we provide it as a flag, then we have the flexibility for a platform to either like, do the scanning on the fly and then provide it so that it can make sure that it's in the right format and is up to date. Or, different, if we wanted Stack authors to bring their own SBOMs, that could also be a feature that the platform has, to just trust an SBOM from the stack that's provided in a certain way. I feel like it leaves both options open, right?
I think like the easiest way to start with, if you want a dumb implementation, is to ask the user for like a file on disk that the platform includes. Then we can add SIFT and fetch things from add stations or attached SBOMs, or then like we can have something that just scans the image if something's missing and attaches it. So like we can do it progressively. There's nothing in this RFC that says that you must do it in a certain way. It just allows for a really flexible way of attaching SBOMs.
I'm still a little worried about the user experience, just like taking a pack CLI as an example, right? Like, to me, the biggest risk is we introduce support for, like, we've kind of carefully designed this API so that at every point, you can definitely get an accurate kind of bill of materials of every piece that gets installed. And so at any place where there's like a non-obvious, hey, you have to figure out where you're going to, get your SBOM from here, right? Many users are going to miss that, right? And the run image is a big source of, potential. It's like a large number of packages kind of can come in through that avenue, right? And so it puts it on the platform to say, whatever build process we use, we're going to make sure with certainty, right, that if there's not an SBOM available, we can automatically grab SBOMs for all these components. And if there's not one available, then we're going to make it very clear to the user that that's true, right? Nothing about this necessarily blocks that, right? But then, if the suggested implementation of this for Pack is to integrate SIFT, are we comfortable with Pack integrating SIFT directly and making that, part of the Pack experience for all users, right? And if we are we comfortable with SIFT actually pulling the run image and, opening it up locally, right, and scanning it and, generating that SBOM on every build when the user doesn't use a run image that has an SBOM? Like that seems like it's, I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do, right? That might be even better because it means if the user uses a custom SBOM or, or a custom run image, right? We're doing the absolute best we can to get the data there, but that definitely has performance implications too. I want to make sure that if that's the user experience that we're talking about delivering for Back, that everybody is okay with that workflow.
But
Seems like,
sorry, go ahead.
All right, I was going to try to time box this because we've used about half the time. We had a couple other things on the agenda as well. And it seems like this could benefit from a conversation with me, Natalie, Sam, and Steven separately, maybe. Anyone else? deeply invested in the run image SBOMs.
Sounds good. I'm not blocking this. I just want to have
There's things we
more
need to talk
information.
through, it seems like, yeah.
Yeah, I want to have more information in the RFC about what we expect the full workflow to look like for a pack, for example, right? Before we go down a particular path.
Sorry to unceremoniously cut us off here. But I wanted, go ahead.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought. I forgot to say what.
I wanted to leave time for, the next two. So maybe we can move on to alternative project scaffolding impact. I think this is one that some of the Build Pack author folks here might have opinions about. I forget who requested that this one be on the agenda and might want to give an intro for it.
I asked it to be put on there because we were having some discussions during core team sync, and I was trying to shut that down a little bit. Either do it here or in kind of BAT, and we may talk about it again in BAT on Friday. But this is basically just a follow-up on Joe's original kind of Build Pack templating proposal, where we kind of scoped that down to just doing it for the bash kind of Build Pack use case. And we explicitly had a section called future work that was supporting other languages. And then I think Aiden was the one who opened this RFC that talks about potentially adding a --libcmb flag, as well as a kind of template one that could kind of be hydrated from any URL that I assume followed a specific, that followed the kind of format that he has listed. RFC. So it's going to be a, so basically there's going to be in that template a prompts.yaml that allows you to basically specify a certain set of prompts that you can ask the user, and then kind of, I believe the rest of it will be just kind of the skeleton of the thing you're generating. And then you can have in those files basically this templating substitution to kind of replace values, and then kind of built in these these flags here. The IDE version API stacks will be kind of independent of prompt that will be applicable kind of across any template that we're going to do. This allows you to kind of generate it. I think some of the unresolved questions from the discussions from the actual pull requests are around, I think he wanted libcmb at least to be offline, so it would be kind of baked into pack. So us updating it will require changes to pack every time. And I think I also had some questions around kind of like default values, if we should have any, or if a template could provide default value for some of this stuff. Yeah, I think that's basically the overview of it. I know just briefly from yesterday, talking with Javier from the meeting, and just where should this stuff live, kind of ownership of who would actually own this stuff. I imagine the BAT team seems to be the right home for at least owning the libcmb template. And also may have interest in helping out for the broader template stuff as a whole, but kind of open for discussion and other things related to that.
Can provide some context behind the RFC. So
Sure.
we have something similar that we use, but based off of cookie cutter that scaffolds projects for us that are built back, that are libCNB based. And I think Aiden was inspired by that for this whole RFC. And there were a bunch of open questions around like replicating some of the functionality we have there into this RFC. So cookie cutter is a Python project. It's not easy to find an equivalent for it in Golang. And it provides things like validation of inputs, being able to provide these prompts non-interactively, being able to provide like a list of options or choose a default value, among other things, and being able to run pre and post scaffolding hooks. So we sort of use all of those to generate like an appropriately scaffolded repository at the end of it. So most of my open questions were around like how do we deal with that, and also in terms of just the offline behavior, I think it might be easier to just keep the template separate from like the actual tool that can take in a URL or something and then scaffold it. Even in terms of air-gapped environments, people have Git repositories or something that they can point this tool to. So it's not like Pack needs access to the internet. It's just that it will need access to some network that has a Git repository which contains the original template. But I think it will be very, like, it's going to be very tedious if each time we make an update to the template, we have to go and bump the version and back and release that for the end users to get the new one. So I'm mostly in favor of a remote template, and we can follow a strategy similar to default builders where like we say like these build pack ones are like the default ones, or like maybe we can include templates from the same set of organizations we get build packs or builders from. So like the Ket or Heroku can have like some default templates. And then for anything else, you can just provide any random repository and Pack will scaffold it for you. This also doesn't have to be Pack, but like Pack is our all-in-one solution to end user interactions, which is why I think it was like the RFC suggests Pack.
I mean, it's where the current command lives as well, for what that's worth.
Yeah.
So you're not really paving your ground there. I think
even if behind the scenes we extract Pack into multiple backing repositories, I do think it's convenient for end users to be able to access it all through Pack, just because from the discovery point of view. Like I know when I'm using command line tools, I'm often looking at the help to be like, what else could this do?
Why would we have multiple backing repositories for the feature?
Just for ownership purposes. Let's say the platform team doesn't want to maintain this piece of tooling.
In the end, we want it all versioned with one, like we're not looking to separate the release process for the templating functionality from the release process for Pack, right?
Yeah, but I think the template generation tool, once created, it's unlikely to have changes to it. The templates themselves will have new flags or like support new APIs or different behaviors, but the scaffolding tool itself is fairly generic. Like just for reference, the current tools that it refers to have been mostly unchanged for the last 3 or 4 years. So yeah, like I'm not expecting a lot of changes to the actual scaffolding logic if we just take a URL as an input.
Oh, you just mean that templates should be in separate repos from pack, not that the logic that does the scaffolding itself should be in a separate repo from pack.
I'm not even arguing that it should, but that it could without affecting whether or not it shows up in pack. I think we've run into situations before where it might be nice to extract some things. Like if you think about the logic, maybe for like packaging a build pack. If we had a beautiful Go library for that, I could see that having uses, and pack using it to provide certain commands is just one of them. Like especially a lot of people who could use pack functionality as a Go library are hesitant to because of all of the Docker dependencies and other stuff that comes with pack because pack is pack. So separating simpler things into independently consumable libraries would meet some users' needs, but I think they should all still roll up into pack because that meets a lot of users' needs as well.
Yeah, if we think making it reusable would be good, then that sounds great. I just was curious.
Yeah, there's some maintenance overhead as well. I think pack repo itself has grown to where it's pretty hard to maintain. And I think that's another aspect of trying to maybe break it up a little bit.
Breaking up and doing that stuff is out of scope for this particular RC though, right? Yeah, I mean, I guess to Sam's point, I think ideally, at least in code somewhere, even if what pack does is package it when it gets released or something, should at least live in a probably separate template repo that's specific to libcmb that team owns.
I think if we really, really want offline behavior, we can include a copy of it in pack by default. If it can't reach the internet, then it can just use that. But like, if you really, really want offline build pack creation, which seems unlikely to me, but yeah.
You just have a way that you could pass the template repo with the local path. And then
That's also possible.
Yeah, that gets you offline behavior. And it's also gets you good behavior for developing this stuff, right? Like if you want to play with it, it's nice to be able to use a copy that's just on your local machine.
So the current tools are referenced in that RFC. They just require a Git repository and they support all the Git protocols. So like local file systems, SSH, HTTPS. So any of them work.
You were mentioning a curated list of stuff, Sam. I know that was in Joe's original RFC to have potentially like a repo of templates potentially, but maybe that's like not the right format there, and we just care about probably even something more akin to a registry that points to something. But is that something that is not like mentioned all in this RFC, though you did call it out in your explanation of the motivation behind this? Is that something that you're interested in doing as part of this, or is this just libcmb plus URL?
I think like I was hoping we could follow a similar path as our default builders or trusted builders. Like we can include the templates that live in build packs initially, and then like if some of the other vendors that we've come to trust have their own templates that use this tool and they request it, we can add it.
In that model, does that mean there's no libcmb flag, but there's just template, and then instead of URL, you can pass like libcmb or buildpack/libcmb or something?
Yeah. I was hoping like the URL, like you have to provide the entire URL, but like there's a pack suggest templates or something like that, and you can do pack config default template equals go libcmb, and then that way if you don't provide any URL, it'll just pull the latest one. But I think I left all of those as comments. Those are ideas, but like nothing concrete. But like I've been involved in maintenance of like project scaffolding tools for a while, and like it's generally easier to just provide an explicit path to the template rather than bake in default ones. We can provide like the discoverability mechanism can be baked into pack. Like you can have something that suggests that here are the template URLs, but I don't think we should hard code the like behavior with special flags.
I agree with that. I think it's simpler just to use the Git repo as the address of the different templates. And then we can prompt people to help them find it.
How do you imagine that latter thing working, Emily?
The same thing as pack suggest builders right now. It's just a hard-coded list.
Yeah, you could suggest templates. We could even do something similar to like what Docker Hub does, where, you know, every image is a full address, but if you leave out certain parts, we fill things in. So we assume it's GitHub, you know, build packs, and then whatever the name is of the template, something like that. Could like make commands shorter. Sorry, I don't know why my camera's like giving up on knowing how to focus.
It's fine.
Yeah, so I don't know if the RFC goes into this, but do we envision a repository per template and not having templates within a repository?
It's easier to manage it one per repository, simply in terms of testing the template and other things. But again, some of the tools that I referenced there allow for subdirectories inside a Git repository.
Yeah, it doesn't, I don't think it specifies, if I remember correctly from my reading, Javier. I mean, it's probably worth asking if we want to mandate one-to-one. In the Docker example, they have something like Docker library, right? Which basically supports stuff like you can do from Ruby, from Python, from whatever. And that's kind of how they've allowed doing various languages, even though Docker itself does not maintain as a company all those things. I imagine we also don't want to be in the business of maintaining language bindings for any kind of libcmd type of thing. And then also, well, even if we aren't in the game of that, like even maintaining the templates that go with supposed language bindings.
We probably don't want to maintain a ton of templates because, you know, we can have one or two useful ones, but I think when it comes to templates, people always want their own anyways, right? They're going to like fork yours and customize it with their particular flavor of stuff. So we're never going to maintain a bunch of templates that are useful to everyone. We just need to maintain some good examples, and then people can derive their own from there.
Yeah, I would say one per language at most.
Well, I guess I was saying, like, for the Docker library example, like, I mean, there's basically a ton of outside contributors that even if you aren't maintaining that template per thing, like people who basically own that whatever language binding potentially, it's basically like a shorthand.
Yeah, but that I don't think our templates are going to scale that same way. I mean, what you're talking about is like distributions of Linux and things like that. Like, there's a lot of possibilities where we're talking about, like, I think like I was saying, one opinionated template that we maintain. I think we should focus on a burgeoning ecosystem of templates, if that's, you know, if it's going to grow. But otherwise, I think we should have a very narrow set that we are officially maintaining or something like that.
One did simple one in Bash, and then one that uses our language bindings.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree. And there are also other mechanisms to discover templates. Like the Docker library example is not exactly one-to-one, since that also is like a registry where like multiple people can push things, whereas this would be like Git repositories that we don't own, or like we'll have to provide them some write permissions or something. So
Well, I mean, under the
the-
hood, it's like Docker library, right? The
Yeah,
Docker
but-
library repo.
but wait, that's they still maintain those things separately, right? There's not just one huge thing that pushes all of those out, is there? I'm not sure. The other way that I've seen templates being discovered is just like repository topics. Like if you search cookie cutter, for example, on GitHub, it'll give you a whole list of templates, and then they define certain tags in the documentation saying that if you have a Python cookie cutter template, tag it with these repository tags so that it's easier to search on GitHub. So we can do something similar, like for the discoverability aspect. We can be like, if you're creating a build pack scaffolding template, tag it with like build pack template or something, and for these languages, tag it with like so and so topics or something like that, and then we can provide links to those in our documentation or something. I think what we're doing with this RFC is nothing specific to build packs. Like project scaffolding is a generic tool. We're just providing templates to it, which are build pack specific. And I personally would have liked to not re-implement the wheel, but since we want it in pack, yeah.
I guess the other option is we just create the cookie cutter template and encourage people to use it separately from pack, right?
Yeah.
I feel like if we're doing that, we'd probably want to take build pack new out of pack, because I feel like we're hinting that this is the way to scaffold build pack. So we should either make it more fully featured or totally move away from it.
I mean, because like these tools are well maintained and like fairly popular, and people use them for not just build packs, but for like lots of other project scaffolding. So it's more maintenance burden on our side to have a bespoke tool that does generic project scaffolding and templating.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the challenge for us though is that we're going to cut across a lot of different ecosystems. Whereas like the examples, like it's in JavaScript, it's Yeoman and it's cookie cutter or somewhere else. Like I think a lot of those tend to like interoperate with NPM or whatever. So I 100% agree with you. It's just I think it might be challenging to ask people to use a particular tool outside of pack.
Well, so they have to package and like packaging.
Yeah, right. To deliver, they also have to deliver the template in that way. Yeah.
Alternatively, I'm not suggesting we do this, but there's also web tools that will do this for you. So you just authenticate to it as a GitHub app, and then it scaffolds things for you. But again, that limits things to GitHub, a hosted offering on the internet, and then so on and so forth. So like you could potentially have a create button on registry.buildpacks.io that does it for you if you wanted an experience like that. But again, that limits where and how you can use it.
It is sad anytime we're like re-implementing something that's not specific to build packs. Ask myself why are we doing this when we have, so many things to maintain already, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say like to kind of counter on the idea of people pushing people to, let's say, cookie cutter when they're used to something else, is maybe the alternative is for us to provide templates that we care for, which is the bash and the lib CNB, to provide those to the various ecosystems and toolings in that fashion, right? So we would have a cookie cutter template. We could have whichever one you mentioned for NPM and so forth. And would that be less of a burden than us having to create our own templating system?
But it's a question of what are we optimizing for, right? Like in my mind, I'm optimizing for build pack authors, especially encouraging new ones. And I think anything outside of build pack new is friction, even if it aligns with the tools they're already using. I mean, the reality is like even people that use Yeoman aren't using it day to day, right? They use it once a month at most probably. And so it's a new tool, even if it fits into their ecosystem. And yeah, I agree that there is some additional burden. I think that's why the first iteration of build pack new was so dead simple. Like, but I would challenge that it is a burden to maintain build pack new today. Like it seems
not.
other than
Right.
updating the API version, that's the default, which is kind of annoying. And I think so. That's why I think like we should try to keep it simple. But I do think there's value in providing the experience from pack. But let's not. But we should ask ourselves. I agree. We should ask ourselves if we are, reinventing the wheel, and if we want this to become more fully featured, then I think maybe we should consider moving it out of pack. But I don't think what's in the proposal is so far along that we should do that.
The proposal suggests creating like a new parser that can parse prompt values and things, and creating a scaffold, like reusing some existing tools, but creating a whole new scaffolding tool that's just a generic scaffolding tool.
But it's limited to like the 4 or 5 options, right? Okay, maybe I missed that. My impression was that like 90% of the template was static, and that the fields like ID and stuff were parameterizable.
Those were just the default flags because they carried over from build pack new. There's an entire like additional file with any branch flexible.
Oh, that's what that file is. Okay, yeah, I didn't completely understand that. The YAML file, right?
Yeah. So that's why I was saying like what we've built is a generic, like what the RFC proposes is a generic scaffolding tool, nothing specific to build packs.
We only have a couple minutes left. In the beginning, we had sort of kicked the process report to the end here, mostly because we didn't have any of the Bloomberg folks. Now, Sam, you are here. I know that you weren't necessarily the one leading this, is mostly Benjamin, but do we want to talk about it today, or do we want to?
I do not know what happened in the last meeting. So I have
last meeting got canceled, so now you do.
Oh, okay. I am not up to date with like what the responses were for the original like issue.
There's not been a ton of action here.
But for what it's worth, like I think we'll need that internally in Bloomberg, regardless of whether or not the upstream project implements it. So we were hoping that we could upstream it.
After thinking about it, there's part of me that would maybe rather have a way where we could, if someone wanted to do this, instead of having it in the launcher, you could have it in the entry point in front of the launcher, right? It would be sort of a configuration at the lifecycle level that you're like, insert this into the entry point, and then it can manage the launcher. I think
the only reason we suggested a launcher was that there was no easy way for something at the builder level to modify each and every entry point that a build pack contributes. So like if we could modify the process types to inject something in the beginning, that would work. But there's nothing like that.
I think it's maybe even better if it's upstream of the launcher, though. It's more similar to like Docker run in it, where,
Yeah.
the launcher does replace itself in memory. So managing the launcher is as good as managing the process. And maybe that's the right place to do it. So we're not introducing complexity inside the launcher. It's just purely, this is the very entry point before your launcher. So like at export time, if you wanted to, inject something that's like, here's a binary that's on my run image, or I'm providing it. So I'm like hand waving here, but it's like that goes in front of the launcher instead of after. Because I don't want the launcher to do this always by default is sort of where I've come down. Because I know we have a lot of, in the past, even when things were kicked off with bash and then people went into the container and saw bash as PID1 instead of whatever their process was, because of our launching logic, people didn't like that. They want to see the application be PID1. Some folks, they're like, I don't want to understand whatever your situation is. I know what my application is. I want to see, like Java jar as PID1 if I'm running a jar. I think it feels a bit too heavy-handed to me to do this in every situation, but definitely feels like something where we could provide an escape hatch, but maybe like tangling with changing the processes is complicated because it's the wrong place, and we should be tangling with the entry point that invokes the launcher and letting you sort of like stick something before that.
I think there is some flag in the exporter that allows you to specify the launcher binary, right?
Yeah, so you could already like replace that with a wrapper.
That's what we do,
like,
right?
Could we clean up that interface to make it more obvious that that is a thing you could do, kind of stuff, I guess is the question.
So there's been a separate thread that we've been trying to solve, which is builder specified configuration. So let's say you want the builder to specify default values for some build pack configuration about processes or anything that goes in the output image. So that's not controlled by the build pack, but the builder. So if we could sort of capture all of these requirements and put things on the builder that we wanted to end up in the output image, that would also be fine with us. So if we could define that if the builder has the specific binary at this place, the launcher should just invoke that before going through the default route, or something like that. That would also completely work. That way we can just put teeny in there in that place, and then we don't even have to implement our own reaper.
All right, I think that sounds good. I'm sorry I have not written up a more thoughtful thing here. I keep delaying giving a good response to this, but I think if everyone's okay with that being the seam, I think that could work. I like that better than either modifying the launcher to do this or using it after the launcher in front of the build pack provided process.
I've also seen other use cases where people are trying to modify the each and every process provided by a build pack with something similar. So if we allow for something like this, we could also enable all of those use cases.
Yeah, I could see this case being in front of launcher, but I do think we still probably need something to eventually kind of post-process the processes that have been defined at a platform level, maybe as well. I'm not sure where that needs to be, but we've talked about that before as well for having log drains or something like that, stuff like this that can sit in front and sort of sidecar-ish behavior, if you will.
Exactly.
Ben's not here. He'd be triggered by that comment.
I don't love it either, but I think there's just too many specifics of the different ways people want to do that, and maybe there are other ways to do it, but we're also at time right now. I have to go.